Hi, everybody. I am so glad that you're joining us today. We have some very special guests. Dee Dee Halpin and Julie Blumberg are here. They're with Houston School Options, and we're going to present preparing for admission season. So I'm Sarah Downey, and I own and direct at-home tutoring services. The company's been in business for 25 years. My kids were very young, and I saw the benefit of tutoring, and I became wholly obsessed with the education landscape here in Houston. And I was fortunate enough to acquire at-home tutoring services. We started with just a few tutors on the roster, about 11 or 12 of them, and some very limited geographic area, mostly in West U in Houston and River Oaks in Houston. And we've expanded our service lines to include academic tutoring, test preparation, academic coaching, and college counseling. And we service now the entire United States. I have a son, Pierce, who attends school here in Houston, and I have a daughter, Tessa, who attends school in Georgia. Julie or Dee Dee, do you each want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, happy to do that. So I'm Dee Dee Halpin. My background is in special education. I was a classroom teacher for a while, and then I was trained as an educational diagnostician. So I started doing testing first in the public schools and then eventually in private practice. And I have three grown children. These are my grandchildren on this picture. And they don't live in Houston, but we, as a family, went to a lot of schools because my three children all needed something different at different times. They were also several years apart in age, and so we're rarely in the same schools. Um, I started this practice back when I was choosing kindergarten for my oldest daughter. It's been almost 40 years since that time. And a friend and I, who were both struggling just a little bit with where to send our children to school, kind of recognized that if we, as educators and native Houstonians, were having difficulty making these choices, that there were probably other people who needed even more help. And we found a community of expats coming here, working with relocating to Houston from all over the world, a lot of them working with the oil and gas industry, some working in the medical center. We just have a very international city now. And over the years, worked with a lot of families who were moving here and had no clue about the school system in the United States, much less even in Houston, Texas. And so um, that's how we really started. And Julie joined me about 8 years ago, so I want her to give a little bit of her background.
Yeah. So
I
my
will interject. I will interject and say, I know you've 3 decades of experience, but the needs of families are still the same. There's still questions about school choice and some of the unique circumstances that people would need to talk to someone like you about school selection. So I think it's interesting that I know that you've seen a metamorphosis of maybe your clientele or where they're coming from, but the needs are still the same. What is the best school for my kiddo?
That's right.
yeah, and we're going to talk more about it, but the testing piece of it all, Dee Dee's diagnostician background is a huge asset to our company. And so we'll kind of talk about when diagnosticians are needed and then when test prep for with people like you, Sarah, are strongly needed in school admissions. So but as Dee Dee said, I joined her 8 years ago. I'm Julie Blumberg. I was a second grade teacher and a fifth grade teacher. I left the classroom in 2014 to start a tutoring business because I really enjoyed the one-on-one aspect of working with students. And as I was doing that, I was freshly almost married and no children. So I was tutoring, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And there were some kids that I was seeing maybe 2 or 3 hours every single day after school. They were coming home, these kids, and redoing school basically with me. And it was a lot. And two separate families said to these parents, I said, I'm the worst business person in the world, but we're going to find your child the right school. You won't need me anymore, and I'll find new business and your child will be thriving. And so we did two separate, what we what I call now school searches, because looking back, I'm like, whoa. But there was so much more to know, and I had so much to learn from Dee Dee. But we got them both to separately the right places for them. And I was telling everyone about my brand new idea of finding the right school for kids. And I happened to open my mouth to someone and they said, well, do you know Dee Dee Halpin? She does that. And so I reached out to Dee Dee. I was 6 months pregnant with my oldest child in the picture there, who's now going to second grade, and my younger one going to pre-K. And Dee Dee and I joined forces. I saw a real need in the local community, and that need actually really continued to grow during COVID. So Sarah, you can probably speak to what business for you looked like during COVID, and parents started realizing things about their kids. The months out of school, the virtual learning at times set some children backwards a bit, and so just the needs of these kids and what was once working, or what worked for their sibling, or what worked for the neighbor's kid, was no longer working for, someone's child. And so, there was real importance to what we were doing, and our local business has really just taken off. And we love to be able to say that Houston just has so many unique schools, more than anywhere else in the country. And so we're really lucky to have that and do what we do.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because I know that, as you all have grown, your breadth and depth have grown, outside of Houston. I talk to families from all over the country. And again, we just touched on this. I talk to students in California or New York or Houston, and the questions are the same. What is the best fit for my student's learning style relative to what the school environment can offer? I think that they're all important questions, and it's such an overwhelming situation at times that I think that it's important to make those inquiries, and then to have the support of somebody who's experienced and knowledgeable about any kind of school, geographically, and also like fit in terms of the
And
culture.
despite our name, Houston School Options, we've done searches in other cities too. We just have a real expertise here because we have such easy access, and we can get into the school so much quicker. But we are happy to work with families outside of Houston too. So these are the types of schools, and even this list can look overwhelming, just because if you're not aware, if you're someone who went to public school yourself, sometimes it's hard to even realize what else is all out there. But we have a very extensive public school system, and many different public school districts in our greater Houston area. But everybody across the country, based on their address, has a zoned school, a zoned elementary, a zoned middle, and a zoned high school. In some school districts, though, there are lots of other choices that families can make. And so, and school choice is becoming a real thing that a lot of school districts are offering now. We have an extensive magnet program in the Houston School District, where families can choose to go to a school that has a special program that may not be offered in their zoned school, and they can apply for that. And there are lots of other special programs, like, for example, an international baccalaureate program that a public school might offer, that if your homeschool doesn't, you can apply to. And there's a very extensive process for doing that in the Houston School District. We also
And
have, go ahead, Julie.
we always say that, it's great when your child can go to your zone public school. We encourage parents to check that out, know that option. If it's parents of young children who are looking for a home, even to consider the zone school that they're zoned to, because that is your only guaranteed option, no matter where you live. And so it's really great when you can go there and utilize that, and it works well. It's just then there's all these other options to know that you have when it doesn't work.
And just isolating Houston, I've noticed the discussion ramping up within our own service about the perceived tumult that's happening with HISD. And so we get more and more people contacting us because they need assistance for whether it's tutoring or test prep or whatever, and they really want to discuss what is happening with HISD and their concerns about whether or not their student's going to get a good education there. Can either one of you speak to that issue? With with whether or not you're seeing a lot more discussion about those topics and
Well, we
things.
are. It's making people anxious
Yeah.
because changes happen and they're unprecedented and they're also not expected. And when this happened, we were actually contacted by the media and asked, and our answer was, we're very hopeful that schools that are operating well are not going to be affected by these changes, because the reason for the takeover from the state took over HISD is because we had so many failing schools. Well, the reach has really extended beyond those failing schools, and there have been some changes happening in schools that prior to this really were functioning quite well. So it's unfortunate that those things have happened, and it's made a lot of parents anxious. It's made some teachers anxious. We've seen a lot of turnover in schools because of that anxiety. I am hopeful that it's not going to last forever. And so, we none of us can predict the future, but what we do know is that schools that have really strong leaders in them, strong principals, and also strong parent organizations that are very active in the school are working to trying to work together to be sure that there aren't negative effects from the changes that are happening.
And I'm putting you on the spot a little bit because I know that you don't probably have the statistics in front of you. Are you perceiving that the applications to the area private schools in Houston are increasing such that the admissions is even more constricted?
Quite a bit,
Okay.
yes.
But
Okay.
what I will say in compliments to private schools is that these schools are trying to do everything they can to serve the children that deserve to be there, right? So they're wanting to maybe make extra space or find extra space for classrooms or grow and build their programs. We also, and Dee Dee will touch on this more as she talks about more schools, but we have schools popping up monthly in Houston. And that's a part of what we do. And it's happening other places too. But just like Dee Dee said, we do searches other places. We can screen a school. We can see right through what the questions we ask, the conversations we have, who the real ones are and who's, maybe not for everybody. And no school's for everybody, but maybe not going to make it, if you will. And so, but these private schools really want to take kids and they want to help those students who need and want the families want them to be there. So
We also don't want to scare everybody away from the public schools
Right.
because for a lot of people, it is the only affordable option. It is, as Julie said, the only guaranteed option. And we try to guide families towards the public schools that are functioning well and that we suspect will continue to. But
as a point of reference, I have a daughter in public school and a daughter in private school. So
right.
Well, and to close
So,
out the slide, I think that, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Didi,
okay.
but to close out the slide. So in the years that we've been doing this, a decade ago, the options here would not have been so vast. There are so many different ways now that you can educate your kiddo, your
Mhm.
student, and I feel like that's a really really good trend, and it's what I try to explain to our clients too. Like, listen, just it doesn't always have to be the quote traditional way or the regular way. Just be open to other options, and I would think that you guys explore other options with students.
We try to start a pretty broad search. So we introduce all of these ideas to families. So, we talked on this slide about faith-based schools because this is just a short list of the number of the kinds of religious programs that we have in a lot of private schools. There are also secular private schools that are not preaching a religion or teaching a religion. Um, and we also talk to families from preschool all the way through high school. So some families have a range of, kids and they need one of each. And we talk to them about that too. Gifted programs, Montessori programs, and there are actually new philosophies of education that are present in a lot of brand new schools. We are seeing crop up what we are calling micro schools that are really very small schools that are very specific about what they offer. And for some kids, it's a perfect place, especially for a given time until they're ready to go back into a bigger environment. And we're also very lucky in our area that we have a huge number of what we call therapeutic or special needs schools, so that if a child does have a diagnosis and has a particular learning difference, there are some schools that are very specific for those differences, and others that are just really good about individualizing for every child, and that child is going to get what they need during the school day. So, it could run the gamut of all of these things, and that's when it starts to get super overwhelming for
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah, I could see that.
Okay. So talking about how to prepare for the admission season, that time's coming up. It's starting now. I'm sure, Sarah, you're getting a lot of calls about test prep. But admission season happens the fall before your child will need to change schools. So if your child will start kindergarten in August of 2025, then you're going to start touring and applying this fall. If they're going to start sixth grade, if you want to apply for an off year, so we typically say kindergarten, sixth, and ninth grade are your typical admissions. Pre-K 3, often some schools start pre-K 2. All of that starts this August for the following school year. But even if you want to move your children in, like I was saying, an off year, maybe fourth grade, seventh grade, whenever, you still will go through the admission process. There just may not be as many spaces available, but there's also not as many applications going in that pool as well. So some things you can do starting right now is to know where to locate important documents such as birth certificates, immunization records, maybe report cards if your child's been in a school already, teacher comments, anything like that. Each school asks for very different things. So just keeping tabs on the schools you're interested in and what they want. You want to have a plan for your search. So that's why we like to start the summer before, so that when those dates are released, when those applications come out, families can keep an eye on those websites, or if you're working with us, we keep an eye on those websites and certain of our packages for you, so that you don't miss a date or a deadline of a tour or anything like that. And so we always say you can start working with educational consultants who can really personalize those options for you, help you determine where you will visit. And then, like I said, we do have some different packages that you can choose that will stay on top of the deadlines for you. We never complete an application for a family. That's very personal, but we can remind you of deadlines, talk things through with you, and help in those regards. Another thing that they can do in the summer that we're going to talk about next, though, is what Sarah works on, is test prep for certain tests. So yeah, I don't know if
Can
either
I
of
ask
you
you a
want.
question about this? So if I'm applying as a rising sixth grader, how far back in a student's record does the school go to transfer basically their packet or their school record packet, whatever you want to call it?
They typically ask for 2 years worth of history. So 2 years worth of report cards, standardized test scores. They may, if they see something, they may ask for more, but you don't want to overwhelm them with everything from pre-K 2 all the way up. That's more than a school really has time to look at for every child that applies.
Does the school's the one that packages it up and sends it to the applying school though, right? The parents don't do that.
It
It
depends. It really
depends.
depends school to
Yeah.
school. And it depends what time of year you're applying, which school you're applying to. But yes, often it's a transcript request form that you'll fill out send to the school, and then they have permission to send it on. Sometimes it's you getting those and uploading them yourselves. Just depends on the school.
And I think it's important to mention, at least in the Houston area, that we have over 300 private schools. And I think Julie already mentioned that the new ones are cropping up all the time. And we love to hear about new ones. And if we see a new one, we try to go see it and check it out for ourselves. But it's impossible to look at 300 schools. It's also not necessary because probably they are not all applicable to any individual child, but we can come up with a pretty wide range of schools that any individual child might want to look at. And we try to work with the parameters that families set for us about which ones they actually do go look at.
I get a lot of questions about parents concerned. Let's say they have a third grade standardized testing that they don't believe represents the student's academic mastery or cognitive abilities. So I always get questions about, well, are they going to submit that? Are they going to submit that standardized testing? So as you say, it sounds like it's school dependent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is what we were just talking about, standardized testing. We spend a lot of our time, especially during the summers and the fall, talking about standardized testing because the admissions requirements generally require some form of standardized testing. The younger the student is, the more likely, and you guys jump in if you feel like I'm mischaracterizing anything, the younger the student is, the more likely it's a cognitive based test like the WIPSI or the WISC. And as a rising, maybe fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, and on up, schools usually ask for a test like the IC or the SSAT. So
And these are private schools, right,
private
Sarah?
school, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
Oh,
And so basically, you as a parent just look in the admissions requirements for what kind of testing they need. You're going to see some initials, and you'll become very familiar with those initials as you start applying. The IC stands for the Independent School Entrance Exam, and that's widely accepted along with the SSAT, which is the Secondary School Admission Test. If you're applying in the Northeast, in my experience, it's usually the SSAT. Here in Houston, in some other regions, it's usually the IC. There, the scores are shared with the schools, and that's part of the admissions packet or what they consider in terms of ascertaining whether your student would be a good fit to handle the pace and the rigor at a particular school. And we touched on the WIPSI and the WISC. We're very firm about the fact that no preparation for cognitive testing is what we won't help a student prepare for that, and we don't recommend that any student prepare for that because it could be a complete blanket denial for a student getting considered at any school. Do you guys want to speak to that at all?
I want Dee Dee to share her story as a former diagnostician of what happened one time when she was giving the WIPSI and what a child said to her. It's just an example of why we really strongly suggest no prep for any of
Yeah,
that.
a child actually said to me, "Oh, I just did that with Miss Jenny." I said, "Well, then we need to get your mom," because we had to stop. It totally invalidates the test. In fact, these tests can only be given once a year. So if a child has done it recently, those are the scores that, for whatever other reason, other than admissions possibly, you want to submit those scores because they cannot take it again within a calendar year. So people ask a lot about preparation, and the preparation children are getting for the WIPSI and the WISC is all the life experiences that they have up to that point, or any academic experience that they have up to that point. But it's not measuring academic achievement, it's measuring how children think and process and problem solve. And you really want a good, pure measure of how children are functioning. It's important for the schools. Unfortunately, testing is still just a snippet of what children can do. It doesn't measure everything about your child, but it does. Those tests are pretty good at predicting school success. So it's important. You just don't want to attach too much anxiety to how a child's going to perform. So the only preparation we talk about for those tests is just preparing your child to go to a new place, to be with and walk into a room with a new adult, to do some activities. We talk about, broaching it as telling your child that you're going to go do some activities with a teacher. It's not fun and games, so we don't want to express that too much. But, and also the word testing doesn't mean much to young children, but it can create some anxiety for older children. So, just avoid using the word test because it's not like the test they're used to taking in school anyway. And just prepare them for the social experience of going into the testing session.
I think in contrast to the IC and the SSAT, at the point that students are taking those tests, they're aware that it is going to be, a quote, a test. Um, what I This is what I believe, and I want to ask your opinions on this. I think in rank order of importance, the schools probably review grades, then teacher recommendations, and that test scores can be a basis for denial, but they're usually never a basis for acceptance. So to me, you want your student to be in, I'm speaking about the IC and the SSAT. You want your student to be in the quote qualified pile rather than using it as a basis for denial. And so prepare defensively for these tests, expose them to the content, talk about test taking strategies, try to ascertain whether there's any foundational gaps in something like math, and help a student, close those gaps. But I think a lot of parents are very anxious about the results of standardized testing, particularly the IC and the SSAT. But I believe it's not as important as other factors. Do you believe
Yeah,
that?
I think it is so school dependent, right? I
Mhm.
think every school, and we always say schools have an X factor, and that X factor might change year to year, and there's no knowing what that X factor is. And quite honestly, that school might not be able to tell you what's their X factor this year. So it really is, I don't even think that there's a pile for testing at most schools of certain scores and certain not scores. I think equally as much at most schools, teacher recommendations, behavior, grades, parent involvement and interest in their child, all of those aspects are really, really important. So I can't prioritize or put any kind of one above the other. I think it really is an overall picture in every school. And like I said, each year might be looking at something different a little bit. And they're figuring that out as they go through their pool of applicants.
It's a
But
moving target.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
the biggest
Yeah.
thing about the IC and the SSAT is the prep, though, because the one thing we tell families is what you don't want, the complete opposite of the whipsy and whisk, is your child sitting down and taking that test for the very first time, sight unseen, because just the
Can
timing of it and the format of it can catch you off guard. So if kids can just be familiar with the test, that's enough to ease that anxiety in many regards.
I 100% agree with you on that. 100%.
Yeah. And Sarah, can you speak to, and I don't mean to put you on the spot looking for dates or anything, but just like we spoke about the whipsy and the whisk can only be taken once a year, the IC, and I'm not even sure actually about the seasons of the SSAT, how many times it can be taken and explain the season breakdown, because we're asked that question a lot.
So you can only take, for example, the IC once per testing season, and most schools will not do a summer look back. And by that, I mean that if your student takes it in the summer, the schools won't accept that. You need to take it during, again, I'm isolating the IC during the fall, which ends at the end of November. So if you have a kiddo and you schedule it for December 5th, you're basically done because you had to have taken the test no later than the end of November. And then to me, you want to have the opportunity to take it 2 times and compare scores and decide which test you want to submit just to present your student in the best light. So in this scenario, I see no later than the middle to the end of November. And I always tell our families to tack back 10 days before the earliest admissions deadline. So if you're applying to 4 schools, the earliest admission deadline of those 4 schools is January 10th. So take it no later than probably December 31st.
Mhm.
And that's in the supplementary material. So make sure when you're looking at those deadlines of schools, there's an application deadline when the form and all the good meat of stuff needs to be submitted about your child. But then there's the what we call supplementary materials, and that's things like the testing. And when that deadline is what you're saying to count backwards from.
Yes.
And then another piece we get from families a lot too, with the IC, the SSAT, the WISC, the WIPSI, all of those things. You only take it one time, or you can take the SSAT and the IC twice, but it only, that set of scores that you want to submit is sent to every school that you're applying to. So you don't have to take the WIPSI for every school you're applying it to. They take it one time and then you designate which schools it's sent to. And then same for the IC and SSAT. Correct?
Good point. Yes. Yes. But I again, and there's so many nuances to some of this stuff. But so when you register on the parent portal, there's an opportunity to submit the scores, and we always counsel the our families, do not designate any schools yet. At the very end, when you're ready to press send and have these scores submitted, is when you decide to where they should be sent.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
Good.
Yeah. That's a great tip. You
I
can't
think
do
it's also important to know that the WIPSI and the WISC are standardized based on age. And the IC and I assume the SSAT are grade norms based on what grade you're applying to, but they are also normed on the population of children that are applying to private school. So you might see scores that look different from the scores you're used to in a standardized testing setting where they are nationally normed across the board. And they just to be aware that, the scores may not be as high as you're used to seeing on other standardized testing, just because the norming population is already a little bit skewed toward the upper ranges of ability levels, because these are all children applying to private schools.
Very good point. And
Reminder.
we could literally spend an entire webinar just talking about standardized testing.
Scores.
So anyway,
Yeah, no. So Dee Dee, do you want to talk about the problems that our families?
So yeah, so we talked a little bit about just not knowing where to start and being totally overwhelmed. And the fact that we have over 300 private schools in the Houston area, we have over 30 public school districts. I mean, that's enough to be intimidating already. And so, just feeling overwhelmed and not knowing where to start is a reason why we hear from a lot of families. Sometimes when children are already in school, that placement isn't working. And when your child is miserable at school, it makes for a miserable home life. And so if you're not, and especially in a place where there are a lot of options, there's no need to keep a child in a school where they're miserable. So when we hear from families that children are unhappy or they know the current placement isn't working, we try to make a change as quickly as we can, because there's nothing better than the feeling of placing your child in the right school after they've been in the wrong one. And I've been there myself, with my own children. Um, and, because zoned schools are not always the best schools for a child, none of my children used our zoned elementary school, for example. It can be a real important thing to know what the other options are in the public realm and in the private realm.
And something I'm thinking back to our last slide and discussion about testing is that, you can make a change at any point in the year. And if you need to make that change, so Sarah, you mentioned summer IC or summer, summer WIPSEs, those tests can be given, if a child is deciding in April that if you're deciding that your child's not going to go back to their current school, the IC can be given, the WIPSE can be given, the WISC, all of those things can be given for a very quick change. So there's ways that we make this work that families, maybe determine in April or May that they're not going back to their school. And we have families moving here in June, July, August who need a school for middle of August, and we can make it happen. So testing can happen. And Sarah, I think you've even helped many of our clients with quick IC test prep, and just getting them, like we said, familiar with that test. That's a time when the test can be taken in summer, correct? To just clarifying.
yeah, sometimes we talk to people who say, okay, this is a potential scenario, and we're waiting to hear back from the school on whether they're going to require it.
Mm-hmm.
So so sometimes we're on hold waiting to hear if they're going to, ask for certain things. So,
but the IC can be taken at home with a proctor online. Like there are ways to get that done. So, we can help you, Sarah can help you get the test done. It's just if you're applying in standard admission season, then the summer is not valid.
Fair point.
Yeah. Okay, so how we provide solutions to families who are looking for schools, we start pretty broad. With all those options we have, like Dee Dee said, we don't want to leave a stone unturned. So we present an extensive personal guide to the parents. We do not just suggest schools. So we always say, we don't have information, though there are a few schools we know about that some families haven't, but we don't have information that Google doesn't have, right? But we really customize the schools to each individual child. So we work per child. We meet with the parents to help parents understand which kinds of schools fit their child and their family's needs. We then help parents narrow down those options. And then we help identify the right one for each child after going through the process. Our goal for our families that we work with is for them to have options, for them to, at the end, be choosing between 2, 3, 4 really great choices for their child, we have a process that we work through with families. We actually ended up having many families come to us who we had not done the search process with, who had applied on their own, gone through everything, had some choices, really great choices, and felt really torn. And so we used our pro-con process. We don't make the decision for them, but we can usually help them get there with this pro-con process we have. So we use that for our families we work with, and we use that for families who are just feeling really confused to identify the right school for their child. Really help, we work with families to really identify their values of what they're looking for in a school for each specific child.
And I can provide a kind of a personal professional testimonial with the amount of anxiety that our clients feel. And then if they both go to you and Dee Dee, the feedback that I get is that the tamping down of anxiety is so great. I mean, it ends up kind of flipping the narrative from a negative situation to a positive situation, actually like really enthusiastic about going through the process because they start to understand the process. It doesn't seem as overwhelming. And then they feel that, okay, we did make the right choice. We deliberated, we analyzed everything, and now we're making the right choice. And what a feeling to know that your kiddo who formerly was struggling, or, you didn't know what other options were out there, they now have a viable path. I think it's such a great service.
We can see that sometimes when we're meeting with parents as we're talking, the shoulders relax, the
Yeah.
smile comes back, and we see it, and it's very gratifying. And parents will tell us the same thing, and we know how anxious it can make you. We are parents too. We've made these school choices, and we've been where these parents are, and it doesn't take much for me to go back to the anxiety that I had, once upon a time, even though it's been a long time for me when I was making school choices for my own kids. So, we are very sensitive to that because we've felt it ourselves.
And thank you for that testimonial, Sarah. It means a lot. And
Yes.
we always feel like our clients are in very good hands with you as well. I just got a text the other day. She was great. I really appreciate it. We're starting tomorrow. So,
It was a text from a client, not my husband, though, right?
oh, correct. I haven't met your husband, so no, not your husband.
Typically get
Uh-oh.
feedback. I don't blame him either.
Yeah, no. All right, so just some of our top tips that we've kind of mentioned some of these, but some of them we feel are worth mentioning even again. Don't try to make a square peg fit into a round hole. We say that all the time, listen to everyone around you, what works for their child, but you're the experts on your child and you know what works best. Sometimes this goes as far as siblings. Just because it's right for someone else doesn't mean it's right for your child. And just because it's right for one of your children doesn't mean it's right for the other. Your kids went to two different schools, right, Sarah? Am I wrong in that?
It's
They had two
100%
different.
agree with that.
Yeah. Trust your gut. We rely a lot on a family's gut. Now, sometimes it takes us prodding them a little bit for them to realize that's what their gut instinct is. But when they see and believe and feel something, it is so important that they go with that, whether it means in a terms of a school change or when they're looking at schools, what feels right for their child at that time. You're making a decision based on what you know about your child, what you know about the school at that time. It doesn't mean it's going to last forever. It's great when a school can go pre-K 3 through 12th, right? Because you only have to go through the process once, but that does not happen for everyone. It doesn't happen for most people. So if a school change is necessary, it's necessary. Dee Dee will tell you two things. She'll tell you the only time she ever made a mistake was when she didn't listen to her gut. And she'll tell you that she moved her child the third week of September, Dee Dee, is that right?
Yep.
Because something wasn't working in fourth grade, and she knew she had done her research, of course, but it was what she was kind of doing, starting to do, and knew where she was going to move him to, and made that move the second something in her gut told her it wasn't working. The next one's a really big one for us. When a school says no, say thank you. These schools really know how to form cohorts and groups of students that will be successful in their school, or how to accept a child who will come in and work with what's happening already in the current school who they can serve. So when a school says no, as hard as it is, we say thank you, because it means there's something else out there that's even more right for your child. And then also, like I just already mentioned about Dee Dee and her gut, but a school change does not only have to take place during admission season. It can happen middle of the year, third week in September. It can happen, decide in May that the school is no longer serving your child and you need a change. And so just know that it's okay and it will work out. And people like the three of us are here to help you through that, because it's not easy.
The only other thing I want to say is that as a parent, when you get a result that you wish was different, it feels like a rejection. It feels like a rejection of your kid, and that hurts. And it doesn't feel right because you know that, but for not getting in, they would be fine there, or you believe that. So I do think that, as you say, Julie, that the admissions committees have a pretty refined process, and they know whether or not a student's going to be successful in the environment in which you're applying. So it takes some time, emotionally takes some time to get over this quote rejection. But in my situation, it ended up being the best thing that ever happened for myself, my kids, and my family. So it takes time to kind of work through that a little bit.
I
Yeah, and
have had
another
the same experiences
Yeah.
actually. So yes, I agree.
And another piece on that is, if parents so often want to be like, well, please just take them, give them a trial, try it, and beg their way in. But when the school says no, we say thank you, because you don't want to spend your days, your hours climbing out of a hole, just if your child falls behind, or, it can be a lot on a parent. And if you've ever been there before as a parent, having to, advocate for your child and be in touch with the teachers daily and figure out all of these pieces. I'm not saying parents shouldn't advocate for their child. They're their biggest advocate, but it can be exhausting if it's not being done at the right school. And so that's just another reason why.
And I mean, I know this is a presentation on school choice, but I also feel like, or admissions options, I also feel like it's a little bit of, is this for yourself or is this for your kid? Is this for your student? And so I think that there's time to take a gut check and say, okay, is this really the right place for where they should be going?
And that's where we talk about the best school versus the right school, because yeah, there are schools that have reputations for being the best, but it doesn't mean they're the right school for your child. And you may have that goal in mind and that's what you want, but it may not be the right thing. And there are so many paths to success. It doesn't have to come from that best school. Um,
We
And
always
I was
we
so
always say
lucky.
that if there was one road to Harvard, let's say, we wouldn't have a job, right? Because everyone would go to that school and that would be that. And we were saying it to a client one time, and they kind of both looked at each other and laughed. And they said, well, we both went to Harvard, but they proved our point. One went private and one went public the whole way through. So there was not one path to get there. And it really is so true. Kids end up where they're supposed to be when they've been in the right environment.
Yeah, Harvard may not be the right
Right.
school either.
And
It
we're
wasn't
lucky to have the choices that we do today.
yeah. Yeah. So that's really what we have. I know we all want everyone to stay in touch with both of us. So Sarah, do you want to just tell everyone the best ways to find you?
Yeah, we have our website that's listed. I also, if anyone wants to email me, they can send an email to info@athometutoringservices.com, and we can send some top line information about standardized testing. So please reach out if you want some more information. I'll be glad to send it.
Right. And for us, you can find us at houstonschooloptions.com. It seems funny to get school advice on Instagram, but we do try to share, different tidbits, not even just for families who are looking for schools, but families with children who are in schools or maybe will have children in school one day. So that's Houston School Options on Instagram as well as Facebook. And then our email is houstonschooloptions@gmail.com. We do offer a free 30-minute phone consult when you're determining if our services would be of benefit to you. So we encourage everyone to reach out through our website, or you can email us to get set up with that. It's just, we call ourselves educational matchmakers. We want to find you the right match. So let's work together, find a match for your child. And like you can tell, we have a strong relationship with Sarah, who we refer our clients to often, and vice versa. We're so grateful to have just partnerships in the educational world, honestly. It's so important.
Yes.
Well, I'm so grateful that you both took the time today. And, I look forward to continuing personal relationship with you guys. With you ladies. I keep saying guys, ladies.
Us too.
We love it. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.